Chapter 1. A Soldier's Conscience. All soldiers had orders to kill anyone on sight, men, women, and children. The land was deserted in more ways than one. Even though soldiers marched the streets, looking for survivors in order to take their lives, their presence did not give any sign of life to the desolated country of Immortal. Buildings had been demolished. All vegetation had been burned. The air was toxic and saturated with dust that would not settle, limiting how far one could see. It emitted a hot, spicy scent that burned the inside of anyone's nostrils. It was most uncommon for a country situated north, where the climate was cold most of the time. The obliteration was intended to destroy everything in Immortal, making sure no life would ever flourish there again. One particular soldier had seen so many lives extinguished, he felt dizzy and faint. His head was pounding. He could not distinguish the cries of victims out on the field from the memories of their cries in his head. The guilt was fogging his brain, and he lost count of how many souls were now on his name. His troop continued to raid the city, looking for the last people alive. He heard movement. He turned around and went back, distancing himself from his unit. The dust was so thick, and there was a great amount of rubble to create a new building on its own, that he was not sure what he was seeing in the leftovers of a building close by. The soldier let the rest of his comrades go ahead and signaled he would be back after investigating. As he got closer to the rubble, he noticed two bodies scrambled within the wrecked building. They were moving. The movements were so awkward, the soldier felt sickened, but he couldn't stop staring at them as they tried lifting themselves up with all the rocks and dirt on top of them and collapsing back down. Getting closer to make out the movements in front of him, he saw women clawing out of the rubble, fighting for their lives. His chest was overcome with the feeling of simultaneous tightness and emptiness once he saw why they were fighting so hard. They were protecting something. He realized they had used themselves as shields and saw they couldn't get up, but tried hard to remove the rubble from in between them to let the infants breathe. Not children! The soldier walked closer to them, trying to muster up the courage to end their lives. Lives of beings that would not have the opportunity to experience childhood. Lives of beings that would not grow to love people, explore the world, laugh, cry, feel. Lives that would not be able to dedicate their time to the molding of the world, to contribute. Contributing to what? Destruction, suffering, murder, death? This thought was comforting. He felt better knowing he would be sparing them from a life of suffering, a world that had no room for love and compassion. When he got close enough, the women were startled. They turned their heads at him, trying to conceal what they were trying to bring back up to the surface. One of them, the woman who could move her arms a bit more freely, instead looked at him with pleading eyes. She was able to finish getting the toddler out from underneath her and showed her to him. She looked almost 2 years old. The mother wiped her daughter with a dirty, torn-up sleeve to reveal her face. The girl opened her eyes and took in the surroundings, but did not make a sound. The woman looked back from her child to the soldier. "Please," she cried out. The girl turned to stare at him. He stared into her eyes, her beautiful, round, big, sapphire blue eyes, and he got sucked into the color. It was profound. They played perfect contrast with her dark hair, short ringlets that sat atop her head and sort of made their way to frame her dusty face. She simply stared at him, unaware that she was being handed over to a murderer. "Why must you die?" he thought. The soldier picked up the toddler and immediately felt responsible for her life. The mother then rested her face on top of the debris and let out her last breath. The soldier was troubled as he saw the other woman. He looked at her mangled body, legs still crushed by the fallen debris. He could see the life leaving her, and he felt guilt rushing through his body again. He had seen her trying to do the same as the first woman, so he assumed there was another child underneath her. she wasn't moving anymore. He went to her and started moving the rocks that were still hiding the baby. With one hand, he removed the rocks, and in his other arm, he held the infant girl. As soon as the baby was free to be pulled out carefully, he turned to look at the woman first. Her eyes were open. The look in her eyes was empty. He proceeded to pull out the baby, so small, perhaps about 10 months old. A boy. There was so much death on his hands, including the lives of other children. No more, he thought. No more. He needed to carry them somehow. He scanned the area and found curtains on the floor from a broken window. He set the babies down as carefully as he could on top of the rubble to get the fabric off the ground, picked up the curtains and shook them from debris. A few items dropped on the ground and made a clinking sound on the rocks. He picked up the 2 smallest items and put them in his pocket. He made a wrap for both the babies and threw them on his back. He ran from that area, abandoning his post. The soldier traveled for days, sharing his portions with the babies, water, bread, and some dried-up food he'd mushed into a paste to give the children. He mostly feared for the life of the youngest one, the boy. He needed to be properly taken care of. The boy was strong, however. How many more days would he last like that? The soldier did not know much about children, and least of all about babies. He never had the opportunity to have a family, and now he felt he was too old to even try. At least now he had been given a chance to share a few days of his life with those little ones whose entire lives depended on him. Another thought that kept crossing his mind was how much trouble he would be in with the army if they found out what he had done. He would have to come up with a lie to explain his missing days. He was determined to get those babies to safety. Fortunately, it didn't take too long for him to reach Salavi, the neighboring country south of Imprice. 5 days, he seemed to have counted. All he needed to do was reach the nearest town and drop them off, and he would be on his way back to Imprice with his troop and claim he got lost. The first sighting of a town came before his eyes. Finally, he thought. He did not care for finding a home or people. He just dropped them off at the first building he reached. The buildings were small, most of them only 1 story high. The town looked calm, and he did not encounter anybody. Once he got to the nearest house, he went to the back. He didn't know who lived there. He didn't care. Anywhere was better than where they came from. He set the babies down and looked at them. After spending days with them and trying hard not to get attached, he realized, at the end, he ended up getting attached. The soldier picked them up, one by one, and held them in tight for a hug. He set them back down. He reached into his pocket and placed each of the items he saved from the debris into the baby's wrappings. A metallic greenish-gold polygon-type box he could fit in his hand, and something he thought to be a small, semi-burnt collar with a few visible letters. H-O-U-O-U-Z-E-N. Forgive me for all that's happened to you. I hope you can find a life here and carry on the spirit of your ancestors into a better world, he told them. He looked into their eyes one more time. He then stood up, looked around him, and darted away.